Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com.
You know what makes the perfect gift? Something cute, meaningful, with a heartwarming mission behind it. The Animal Alliance merch ticks all these boxes. There's hoodies, mugs, t-shirts, and even baby clothes are not only adorable, but also help save pets by funding spay and neuter programs. Gifting one of these is like saying, I care about you and animals in need. Check out theanimalalliance.org and find the perfect way to spread some love this season. Brought to you with love by the Animal Alliance.
Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today we have a good friend on the podcast, Shayna McKinley. I actually met her first at a networking party, and then we went from the networking party. She came to an event that I was speaking at, and it's just been a great interaction, great conversation ever since. I feel like we could chat for hours and just laugh and have fun. And that's exactly the type of friendships that I'm looking for. But when I did finally, so I met her, and then the next event that we met each other at, I started asking her questions about her life, and I knew really pretty quickly that she's involved in a lot of things, and she's somebody that I wanted to interview on the podcast because there's so much more to her than I got introduced to her as another friend of ours, girlfriend. That's how I got introduced to her, and that's good. I mean, we love him both. We both love him, so that's good. But it's so much cooler to hear all the depths of who somebody is rather than just a first interaction. And as soon as she started telling me history as far as like different experiences she's had, we've had similar experiences. So I wanted to have the opportunity for her to share that, things in her own family, loss, grief, but also triumphant things, happy things in her life. So I'm not going to give too much away because I want her to share it, but I'm so excited for you guys to get to experience a little bit of Shayna. And then if you want to hear more about her, she's going to start a podcast, she says. Mm-hmm. So we're going to push her to do that. And then you can see her on her podcast, or you can just go follow her on social media and interact with her that way. So Shayna, tell us about your life. Tell us about like the growing up process. What did that look like? What were some of these bigger emotional tragedy moments? How did that interact with you and your spouse, now having a family yourself? How did this all interact, and what were those emotions that you were going through?
Yeah, so like you said, I want to start a podcast. I'm looking to start a book. And so kind of like the essence of my life has been having faith over my own heart, just finding faith, leaning into faith through the heartbreaks and stuff that we have in our life. And part of that dynamic for me that, has taken years to find is not being scared of heartbreak. That heartbreak is a tool that God uses. And if we think about heartbreak, we think about like how painful it can be, but finding lessons through that heartbreak, heartbreak and that pain comes in waves. And when the waves aren't as strong in my life, I have had to, really try to find those lessons. And so, we're looking at my life when it began. As a child, I grew up in a home that wasn't very stable. We were moving all the time. I grew up in a poor home. And so that was a little bit chaotic for me. And I learned as a child to try to have to control my environment as much as I could through the chaos. And growing up, I was kind of a parent to my parents in a sense. And so, as we're kids, we watch our parents grow up. And so I've learned to give my parents a lot of grace through that. And it's helped me as a parent to remind myself, when I fail as a parent, that, I am learning how to be a parent, just the same as I was watching them. And so we moved around a lot. I have, there was 5 of us all together. I have 2 brothers and I have 2 sisters. One of my sisters was adopted out. I didn't meet her until she was 18. I think I was like 10. And so that's kind of like a little bit of my family dynamic growing up. But we had even though we were poor, even though, we did have struggles, and my parents, they had their own, troubles. We were a really loving family. We were a very close family. And so, the childhood was good, even though there was a lot of trauma there with the being unstable, having unstable environments and things. And growing up, I was diagnosed at a very young age of being ADD, so kind of like on the spectrum. And, with that came learning disabilities and being put into, special education, things like that, which was something that I had to kind of felt a little different as a kid growing up in that, and just having those different emotions that come with that, and kind of learning that it's okay to be different. Then fast forward, I got married when I was 23 to a man. And I was in that marriage for 15 years. We had been together for 17. And that ended up being a toxic marriage, just because when you grow up in the dynamic that I grew up, there wasn't a lot of self-esteem. That was different things that I had to find. And so I kind of, when I jumped into my marriage, I found a familiar relationship where it was chaotic. There was toxic stuff. I think that you marry sometimes what you're familiar with. And so for 15 years, I stayed through, mental abuse and infidelity and those things, because I didn't value myself enough. And that is just something, I had to learn through childhood, through my adulthood. And so eventually, when I was in my marriage, my brother was diagnosed with cancer. And with that, I ended up caring for him in his last days. I held him when he passed, and a month later at his funeral, my dad was then diagnosed with cancer, and which was very shocking. We were given, 4 months for him to live, and we ended up only having 4 days with him. That happened, and then with my marriage was already kind of falling apart. We were going to a Christian counselor. We had been going for 2 years together, just to try to work through the infidelities and everything that was hard in our relationship. And I remember the counselor kind of pulling me aside and saying, I know what relationships will survive and what relationships won't. And you've stayed in this for 17 years. And it's my recommendation that you start thinking about how you're going to live your life outside of this, because I don't see it working, and it's more detrimental to you. And so I had to kind of do some self-reflecting. And one thing that had come to my mind was, when you go through grief, like losing a brother or losing a dad, that was the toughest thing that I ever walked through. And so at one point I said to myself, I've walked through tougher. I've held my brother when he passed. I held my dad when he passed. And if I can walk through that, then I can walk through this. And so that's really what gave me the courage to leave, because when you're in an abusive, toxic relationship, sometimes you just feel stuck, and you feel like, you have you have nowhere to go. How can I leave? There were just certain things in our marriage that made me feel that way. A lot of people say, why did you stay so long in a marriage? And there's different, I think women have different reasons. That might just be because you've been beat down and you just don't think that you're good enough to go anywhere, or anybody will ever want you. That might just be because, financially, you put yourself in a position where you don't know what you're going to do when you leave. There's so many different reasons why women stay in abusive relationships, but those were some of mine. And so when my counselor pulled me aside, I just knew, I can do this now. I don't know where I'm going, but it kind of started the process of having that faith over my own heart that I knew God was going to guide me through this, because he had guided me through the death of my brother and my dad. And so I kind of stepped out of that and started living with my mom, and we ended up becoming each other's rock. She had lost her husband, she had lost her son. She needed me just as much as I needed her. And so that just kind of started the process of, where do I go from here? And it was hard because you have all these emotions and you're like, I want to get started. I want to start living life. I'm restarting my whole life. But at the other part of it, I had to take time to heal. And some people don't realize that. And so luckily I had a safe space with my mom where she said, take as much time as you need. Take as much time as you need, because you've been in such a fight or flight mode. Your whole nervous system has to calm down before you can go ahead and figure out your life from here on out. And so I started thinking about life and what I wanted to do. And I would pray to God, like, to just say, what is my purpose? And that answer was to live for him as much as I could, to tell my story to people as much as I could, to give them a sense of faith through whatever storms they're going through. And so that is my goal, and my ambition in life right now is just to touch as many people's hearts as I can. I mean, I go to the grocery store and I start chit-chatting to people just randomly, and it's amazing how many hearts are hurting. And just one conversation with one person at the grocery store, you can change their whole outlook. You can bring them back to God. And so that's what my mission is like going forward in life.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing all those things. I'm so excited to ask more questions.
Yeah.
I've intentionally kind of not asked you a lot of these questions because I wanted to record asking these questions because I want to know details here, but I also want to have other people benefit from that conversation. I know that for me, one of my ideal person that I'm working with, and I say my ideal, the person who's most generally attracted to working with Sam on their financial journey or on their journey to grow is almost always somebody who is divorced, have 2 or 3 kids, maybe 1 kid, and in their early 40s, trying to figure out, how do I rebuild my life after this? Now, they know they don't ever want to be dependent on another human being for their financial resources, for their emotional stability, for their mental health, but they also still desire to have that connection, right? So there's a difference between having a connection and being reliant on that connection. So they're committed to building their own life for themselves and for their children, but they still also want to have an interdependent relationship, somewhere where both people are equally in and working towards the right goals, but with the right parameters and self-respect. And so that's typically who I have ended up working with, and who tends to be I call them my ideal client, not really my ideal client, as though just they're the person who's most attracted to my story. And so although our stories are different in some ways, there's a lot of things that are similar. So I want to talk, or I just want to ask more questions about, you mentioned your early childhood, you had experienced a lot of troubles and trauma, and like what types of things were going on with your parents or with your family life that were causing those types of troubles or trauma?
Yeah, I think that my parents, like I said, they weren't necessarily emotionally mature in some aspects. And I say that with love. they were growing up, and they weren't making the best decisions. And some of those decisions might have been, like, we don't have the money to pay rent, and so we're moving out, but we don't know where we're moving, and so maybe, there was times where, we were homeless and we were living in, hotels, and didn't have food or didn't have, a means to survive. And so that gives you a dynamic of instability and chaos, and, just not knowing what's going to happen the next day.
Sure. Well, as an adult now looking back on, I know that for me, as I became a parent and started having my own children, my level of respect and understanding and appreciation and compassion and all of that for my parents getting me to where I was, like 1,000% more, until you go through it. Sometimes it's hard to recognize the stresses that they were under, but like now understanding more of your own situation and having your own life experiences. And this isn't a they should have done type of conversation, but I am curious, like, what do you feel like could have been either better communicated to you as a child? If you were to go back and talk to this little girl that you were at that time, how could you have communicated what was happening better so that it wasn't so unstable or traumatic? Or potentially, if it's not a communication thing, what could, hindsight, your parents have done more to create more stability?
Yeah, I think that they could have reached out to more family, or planned for the future. I mean, we talk about like financial planning and things like that. And I think a lot of people they live day to day, and it's not that they have bad intentions. It's just a lot of people don't understand budgeting. A lot of people don't understand the forethought of things, and if we're not budgeting and planning, how that might affect your family in the long run. I don't blame them for the things that happened, but I do feel like better planning is always going to be better for your family. And as an adult, I look back and I was like, I don't ever want to put my son in that position. But sometimes life just happens. Sometimes, there are things that happen that you can't plan for too. And so you do the best that you can. And looking back, I know that they did the best that they could with the knowledge that they had, and so that's why it's always important to have people like you in your life, just because when you surround yourself with certain people, they can help guide you. And I think that was one of their downfalls, is that they weren't surrounding themselves with people who could give them better advice, that could educate them on how to not be in this cycle of, we have money, now we don't have it. We have money, now we don't have it,
Sure. So, because there's people that are still in that, right? Even though your parents, that's another generation, there's people right now that are living the same life. Their parents, maybe young parents, and they're thinking, well, how do I actually do better? Because as you said, it's all I know. Do you think that your parents, you mentioned that they could have maybe reached out to more family members. Do you think they had access to a community or to other people that they could have reached out to if they were willing to, that they could have gotten help from?
Yeah, but I think that's hard, because I mean, there is a sense of pride, and shame sometimes when we reach out to people. But I think one thing that I've learned in life is that people are willing to help. People want to help. And it's actually a huge blessing when you do reach out to somebody and you allow them to bless you. And so I think sometimes we put a lot of shame on asking for help, but those are the connections that we're supposed to make. Those are the things that we're supposed to do.
Like, where does that shame, again, because you saw this as a child, you experienced it, and then now as an adult, it's possible that you learned some of that shame, not just from being a child, but as an adult. Where in the cultural conversation or friend groups or whatever, where do you feel like you learned to have shame in asking for help? Where is that lesson that's being taught in our society, and where could we go and say, hey, we actually need to teach a different lesson?
I don't know where that would be being taught. I think that our communities just aren't as tight as they used to be. You know, we normally go knock on the door and ask somebody for a cup of flour. And I think that it's not normal anymore to reach out to each other. We lost that, the strong fibers that we used to have in a tight-knit community. And so that's where I kind of think it comes from, is that people are just not used to doing that anymore, and supporting one another. I think that in today's society, it's I take care of myself. And if you can't take care of yourself, then, then there's something wrong. And that's not how it should be. We should always be lifting each other up. But throughout my childhood, I grew up with shame of asking for help. And it's something that I had always, struggled with. I myself couldn't, ask somebody, hey, can you help do this with me? I need help on this project. I learned to just go all in and take on all the responsibility and do it myself. And part of that, I think, was also trying to control that nothing would get chaotic, because I learned, I have to take care of my parents, otherwise things might get out of control. And so as I was growing up, as I became an adult, I kind of, did that in my own life. And it took some self-reflecting, and some honesty with myself to finally realize you do need help, and you do need to ask for help, and you need to ask for it so others can bless you. Because I'm a person that I always want to help wherever I can. Let me help you. Let me help you. Let me help you. But I couldn't reciprocate like receiving that. And so somebody once told me that's what they told me. They said, let me bless you because it blesses me. So it changed my thoughts.
Yeah. It's so funny because these are the things that, like, although we've lived very different lives and the stimulus for the learned experiences was different, I had an experience when I was I shouldn't say very young. This experience for me was when I was in high school and going to a tennis match, and my doubles partner, their family brought me home and we went out to eat, and they wanted to buy me dinner because we had won. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to pay for myself because I can. Because I came from this poverty cycle as well, believing that what I could produce and what I could offer was more valuable than the reception of something. And so I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I can do it myself. And then I came home and I was really proud of myself. And I went in and told my mom, hey, Mom, they offered to pay for my food, but I said no. And I paid for my own food. And aren't you proud of me? And she said, well, Sam, you like to help people, right? And I was like, I'd love to help people, right? Because my mom had trained us to like to help people. Mm-hmm. She trained us to be servants. She trained us to serve the people around us. And so I thought, well, my value is based on my ability to serve. So then she points out, look, if everybody was like you, if everybody just wanted to serve and nobody was willing to be served, then who could we serve?
Right.
Oh.
Light bulb.
Yeah, exactly. There's service in allowing others to serve you.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you necessarily need the service. And even if you do need the service, that's fine too. But it is a service to allow others to help. Translate that into my family now, married to my wife. My wife is, I love, don't take this the wrong way. It's just a funny, quirky thing that I changed at a younger age, and she's still becoming accustomed to it. But our children, if we want to go do something in our life, then we've got to get babysitters. Like, It's pretty difficult to do life without babysitters. And so who's going to watch your kids? You have to trust somebody to take care of your children. Yeah. And you're in this situation as well. Now, as a single mother, you have to trust somebody to take care of your kid. And so who do you trust? How often do you trust them? And are you believing that you putting your kid to them is actually burdening them with the responsibility of taking care of this kid? And for me, I'm willing to ask even people that I'm not super close to, but that I feel I trust,
right,
to either watch my children, take me to the airport, do things for me, ability to serve me. And Charlie's like, why are you so just asking all the time? You're just asking people. Like, well, every time I extend an invitation for somebody to serve me, that's me extending not just the service, but it's extending trust, saying, I trust you enough to fulfill this role of service for me. Now, you don't have to. There's no obligation to serve, Sam.
Okay.
But if I need help, I trust you as somebody who would serve me if you had the ability to, could serve me as if I actually believe you have the ability to, and I trust you with my kids. Like, I trust you with the people in my life that I care most about. And for me to have that level of trust, even if they never say yes, for them to know that I trust them that way is powerful. And so this lesson that you learned through your childhood is a very similar lesson that I learned. And I think it's these little lessons that make it so that we have this affinity towards each other because we've lived similar experiences, not the same life, not the same gender, whatever, but our experiences are similar.
Yeah.
And they've come in. But so this is physical, right? So if we're looking at the Maslow hierarchy of needs, the bottom one is just like, how do we get our physical needs met? How do we get our food, shelter, housing, things like that? Well, that's kind of works that way. But, and then when you get into your relationship for, was it 15 years, you said? You're in this relationship. You were in the relationship for 17, but you were married for 15. You're in this relationship where maybe you're experiencing some emotional abuse. Maybe you're experiencing some verbal abuse. Maybe you're experiencing, maybe not, I don't know that infidelity would be considered abuse as much as lack of respect, which I think is, you can tip that whichever way you want. But at the end of the day, you're dealing with this person that doesn't value you.
Right.
Right? They don't see the value in treating you the way that you would like to be treated. And if you're not used to asking for physical things where everybody can see you're suffering, everybody can see you're struggling, and you still don't want to ask for help, what about in the circumstances when nobody can see you're suffering, but you still need the help?
Yeah.
So what was the turning point when you decided, you know what, it's okay to reach out for emotional support in my marriage? It's okay to reach out for emotional support in my finances. It's okay to reach out for emotional support when I'm losing my brother. Because if you're a believer that you are the giver, you're the person who's always going to be there to support, it's so much easier to just be the support and be the strong man, be the backbone. But I know, because that's my personality, that you actually do need emotional support as well. It's just you don't know how to express that. So I'm curious, what was the turning point for you that you were finally able to express that to somebody that you needed support?
Well, in the 15 years of my marriage, I never told a soul like what was going on. When I finally decided to come out of the marriage, my dad and my brother, they had all passed already. And I started to, talk to my mother about, why I was divorcing. And she was shocked. Like, she had seen little things here and there. Her and my dad both had small conversations just about little things that they saw. But they didn't know the depth of it. And so, I had learned to just, put on a good face. I have a perfect marriage. Everything's fine. And I was basically living a lie because I wasn't able to reach out to people and tell them what was going on behind closed doors. There was a bit of shame there, embarrassment, those type of things that happen when you're in an abusive relationship or when your husband, continuously has affairs on you. And, so part of me didn't want to admit almost like the failure of what had been transpiring. And you kind of, like, when you're in that, you kind of become numb to it. You become used to not really telling yourself, hey, this isn't right, And so it wasn't until the last time I had found out that he had cheated on me. And I just allowed myself to grieve the relationship. I had allowed myself to say, I can't keep allowing this to happen to me. And that's actually the same time that I found God. It was just like, I was just done, completely done. And I remember just feeling just like so empty, and it's just like I had felt that before, but this time I just allowed myself to feel the emotions of everything that had transpired the 15 years that I was in that relationship. And I remember just like sitting there, just crying like I'm crying now. And I was on YouTube just listening to music, because that's kind of like my therapy, is like I will just turn on some music, sing along, just allow like that healing process to happen. And a preacher came on just randomly. I wasn't really, we grew up in the LDS church, but we didn't practice very much. So it wasn't like a huge part of my life. So when this preacher came on, typically I would change it, but I was just like so sad. I was just like, I don't even have the energy to change like what's on my YouTube. So I just listened, and I really think that God works through even YouTube, you know. And the preacher was talking about how Jesus was in the tomb. And sometimes we can be in our own tombs, and sometimes we have to just decide to get up and walk out of our own tombs. And at that moment, I just imagined like all these broken pieces of me, through childhood, and then through my marriage. And I just felt this sense of like, God's going to take that and he's just going to glue it all back together. I'm still going to have cracks. I'm still going to have, hard things that I'm going to have to work through and really figure out healing myself. But I think in that moment was the moment that allowing God in allowed me to allow other people in, and start sharing my truth.
Giving a gift is great, but giving a gift that supports a mission is even better. The Animal Alliance merch store has so many fun options to choose from: cozy hoodies, cute mugs, and stylish t-shirts. Not only will your friends love them, but every item helps fund spay and neuter programs to reduce pet overpopulation. Shop theanimalalliance.org and give the gift of compassion, proudly partnered with the Animal Alliance to bring you this message.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating thing. Sometimes the first person that you have to be willing to get help from is yourself. You have to be willing to admit, in the 12-step program, the first step is you have to admit you have a problem,
Yeah.
right? If you don't ever admit you have a problem, there's nothing you or anybody else can do about it. And oftentimes that first step kind of gets made fun of in society. Like, hey, you got to admit you have a problem first. And it gets overused and almost can be used manipulatively or a sign of abuse on the other side if you're not careful about it. But there is a level where you do have to admit, hey, I need help.
Yeah.
And admitting it to yourself and being able to tell yourself in the mirror, I need help, is oftentimes the hardest part. It's so much easier to keep saying, I've got it under control. I can hide my shame. I can hide all of these things. I want to go back just a little bit in your story to when you mentioned that your parents had seen some things. Again, because for me, I think we have the opportunity here to shed some light on the exoteric and esoteric aspects of relationships. If you go into bathrooms at an airport, it says, hey, text this number or call this number if you're being exploited, if you're being trafficked, if you're whatever. This is a real thing where sometimes we have to get underneath and help the people who don't think they can get out see that there's a way out. Now, part of that is, how do we educate the public, myself, everybody else, to recognize when there's an issue that maybe on the surface everything looks good, but chances are beneath the esoteric level, inside the walls of somebody's private home, it's a lot worse than what's being shown on the outside.
Right.
I know for me growing up, and again, these are different experiences, but totally similar. I felt that I grew up in an abusive household with my mom primarily abusing us as children. Now, there's not in any way, shape, or form negative towards my mother. I love her, and I'm glad my mom and dad are still married, and everything's great. But in our childhood, we were raised hard. We were raised with high expectations, and they needed to be met. And at the time, I thought, hey, this is abuse. And other people in the world thought, hey, they need to have CPS called on them. And there was lots of times that CPS would show up, and we knew as a family to lie about what was really happening so that we could stay as a family, right? We had been indoctrinated. They're coming to steal you away from us. That's not going to happen. You got to lie to them. You got to tell them what they need to hear so that you can stay here, because otherwise they're going to steal your children. The government is coming to steal you. Like, that was like what we were indoctrinated with. So we were trained to lie, which, again, full transparency, as an adult, I'm so glad we were, because all of us are still one big family. None of us got taken up for adoption. None of us got taken out of the home. Like, I'm glad we were all liars. And I'm also glad that it changed. Not everybody changes in those scenarios. And so that's kind of a hard balance there. I'm not suggesting other people should lie if you're being abused. I'm not suggesting that. I'm really grateful that for my family, at least, my parents, it was more of an emotional imbalance or chemical imbalance while my mom was going through having 11 children, rather than an actual personality trait of being abusive. So there are differences there, and you have to, I don't know who gets to make the determination there. I'm grateful that my life turned out the way it did. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
But the point is, even in an abusive relationship, I got taught to lie about it. I got taught to pretend everything was okay on the surface. I got taught these things, right? So I know it's happening. What could your parents have done? Let's say they noticed these little things. What would have been a way that they could have got through to you and could have asked a deeper question and could have built that camaraderie and that trust deeper, where you would have felt comfortable opening up to them?
I think that with my parents, they were afraid to have the conversation with me because they felt like I would have pulled away, or maybe I wouldn't have, maybe I would have been mad at them or upset with them. I think that it has to be done very delicately, because, there's a sense of sometimes like you don't want to admit it, or maybe you haven't admitted it to yourself even. And so in a sense, we can kind of protect our abusers, because, you're so soul tied and wrapped up, with this person that I know that I was chasing a potential. I would be breadcrumbed and love bombed, and so it was hard for me to admit. And so when you're going to somebody, when you can see, you see things that are not necessarily.
I'm going to put a pause here for a second, just because these are terms that I don't fully understand. And maybe there's other people who are experiencing these and they don't understand what's happening. They just think they're chasing that same thing you're chasing, but it's an opportunity to help somebody change their perspective of what's happening. And it doesn't mean that, let's say you are in an abusive situation. Hopefully you're not listening to this, but if you are, it doesn't mean, get divorced right away. It means recognize and maybe set clear boundaries, get help, have a conversation, find out what's normal, right? That's what the goal of this podcast is for, is to help people heal, not just, and sometimes you can heal, sometimes you can't. So when you say breadcrumbed or what was the other word? Love bombed. What does that look like? If I'm in this relationship that's abusive, what does breadcrumbs look like, whatever that is, and love bombed? I don't know what any of these terms mean.
So basically it's kind of like a cycle. And that might be, doing nice little things, but with an undertone of, I'm doing these things, but you're not good enough for me, to be doing these things to you. And so the breadcrumbing is just like the doing little nice things and showing like this, it's almost like if they're like there's two personalities. There's the side of them that is very giving, very nurturing, very loving, but there's the underlying side of them that, is deceitful, is just tearing you down, just being negative towards you. So it leaves you in a confused state. So there would be times where he would tell me, all my friends say I can do better than you. But then he would turn around and buy me flowers and say, I can't do better than you, and then there would be times where he would say, nobody's ever going to want you, and then right away turn around and, do something nice. And so it creates this confusion. You see the breadcrumbs of him being nice and saying nice things to keep you chasing that person and craving that. Like, I know he can be nice to me. I know he says nice things to me. And it creates like a state of confusion. And so every time I would go to leave, he would say, if you leave, I'm going to commit suicide. And so, of course, I didn't want that on my hands, because I did love him. There was things that I did love about him, and I cared for him. That's why I stayed for so long. And then when I would agree to stay, then it was, oh, love bomb you. I love you, and I could never live without you, and all these things. Love bombing is just where you've had a fight, and you're ready to leave, and then it's almost like a manipulation tactic where they circle back around. You're the one I want, and just adoring you with everything to get you to stay. And so it's just really breadcrumbing and love bombing is just creating a confusing state with manipulation. That's how I view it.
Do you, just curiosity, right? Says again, none of these things that I'm aware of now. My wife should come in here and say, "Yeah, you do this." I don't know. I don't think I do any of these things. But this is a question. Do you think that these individuals who are doing this, because it could happen with both genders, right? Do you think that these individuals that do this, are they super conscious of it, or is it just part of their personality? They think that what they're doing is normal.
I think that I think it's kind of like their upbringing. I think it's part of who they are. They don't realize that there's a level of their own toxic behavior, and maybe they learned it. Maybe it's just a pattern in which they grew up. I think that at some level, when you start bringing that attention to it, it can upset them, and maybe they may know, but I don't think if you were raised a certain way and you become a kind of a person who manipulates other people, unless you really did some good therapy to find out who you are and why you operate in a relationship in a certain way. I don't think that maybe necessarily they can admit to the manipulation things that happen in the relationship. I don't think that a lot of people who are like that necessarily realize what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a crucial part of this conversation. I have a journal that I wrote called the Identify Your Identity Journal. And I say I wrote it. It's really 4 questions. So it's not like it's this I wrote much. I wrote down 4 questions because my wife would ask me often, how do you think the way you think? How did you become the way you are? And as I analyzed it, I went through all my journals. When we were dating, my wife and I gave her all my journals from when I was 8 years old to 23. So an almost daily journal. So it was a lot of information, and I gave it to her. So she got the opportunity to watch me grow up, watch how I process, read all the crap that I did as a teenager and as an adult. I've done a lot of stupid things. I'm not perfect by any stretch of anybody's imagination. Definitely not my wife's or mine, but she got to read all of that. And so she got to watch this process happen of how I processed information. So she said, well, how are you? Who are you? So I went back into my journals and I was like, what questions was I asking myself that led to me processing the world the way that I do? And it's really these 4 questions of what factually happened, removing all emotion about how I feel about it or how somebody else feels about it, just what factually happened, right? You can say, well, he said this to be spiteful. He love bombed me to be spiteful, or he breadcrumbed me to be spiteful, or everything. You can say all that, but that's all the second question. Okay. So the first question is what factually happened. Mm-hmm. Well, he said this thing, and then he said the next thing. And so you write this stuff out where what factually happened. Then you write, well, how do I feel about what happened? Which that's where you get to tell all your feelings, positive or negative, because you can have positive experiences or negative experiences. But it's basically a rhythm, I would say, of how do I process information? I first think of what factually is happening. How do I feel about what's happening? And then the third question for me that I ask, and I encourage other people to ask, is what could also be true? And some people don't like this term, but I like it, so I'm going to use it. This is where I gaslight myself. I rewrite my own version of the most benevolent perspective for everybody involved. Even the abuser, I'm going to write down like, well, maybe this happened in their childhood. Maybe they were raised this way. I'm going to give every excuse possible to this person. Not that I'm excusing what happened, and not that I'm not setting a boundary and accepting accountability for this. I'm not eliminating that. However, it's important that for me, I choose love over anger. I choose love over fear. And so for me to choose to love somebody, I need to build compassion or understanding. I was raised with this phrase: there's only two types of people in the world, the ones you love and the ones you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're never going to know somebody's whole life completely, but you can sure make up a nice story about it. And if that helps you sleep better at night, then that's what I'm caring about. Like, how do I sleep better at night?
Yeah.
So I write down, what could also be true? Why might this have happened? What might have happened in the childhood that made this happen?
Right.
And so that's a big part of it. And then the next question, or the last question, is why am I grateful for this experience, and what did I learn from it?
Mm-hmm.
And if I process information this way, I find that a lot of people, we want to, there's a great book. Have you ever read the book, The Anatomy of Peace?
No.
Oh man, that book.
What's the book?
It's probably my top 3 of books that changed my life. Like, period. It's just one of the most amazing books out there, I think. So The Anatomy of Peace. But in this book, they talk about addressing somebody either from in the box or out of the box. Basically, are we turning them into an object and we're objectifying them? Because as a human, it's easier to objectify somebody. Then I can have all my, I can dehumanize them and have all my shame and guilt and hatred and anger and everybody, because I don't have to recognize they're a person anymore. They're just an object.
Mm-hmm.
Versus when I get inside the box with them and I realize they're a human being, now I feel like, oh man, I wouldn't want somebody to treat me that way. So now I'm going to feel different towards this person. Doesn't mean I'm okay with it. Doesn't mean I'm going to allow the abuse, but I'm going to feel different towards this person. And so I think it's important when we're having this conversation, there's people, these people that Shay's talking about, or that I'm talking about, they're real humans. They're people that we still associate with, we still interact with in a lot of cases. This is not a process of saying anything negative about them. And I just want to be clear about that, to bring this back in. Hey, what's the compassionate view of this? Yes, you chose to get out of that relationship. Yes, it was probably the best choice for you. And how do we help those who haven't adjusted to that, haven't learned from those experiences? And what are some of those signs that we could, if we're seeing these examples in somebody's life, how do we address them? How do we help them come to a realization that they could be in a better situation, even a better situation with that person?
Yeah, I think it's just, it's hard, because I had a lot of friends that I did confide in, and they would say, what's happening isn't right. You've lost yourself completely. When I first was married, it was like joyful, happy, and you end up kind of losing yourself when you're in such a long period of time, and shaming and negativity and things like that. You do end up losing yourself. And so I think the ways my friends helped me was just continually showing up for me, even though they probably wanted to tear their hair out, because they're like, why don't you just leave?
Well, even that, I think that sometimes our friends are supporting us, like you mentioned. Hey, you've lost yourself. They're almost telling you that they're reinforcing. When you tell somebody something like that they lost themselves, that they shouldn't be treated that way.
Okay.
You're talking about all the negative side, and that doesn't help somebody's confidence. That only compounds the shame and guilt.
Right. Yeah.
Versus, instead of saying it that way, coming and saying, Shay, you're an amazing woman. You actually are confident. You have the ability to provide for yourself. You haven't lost anything. You're still that same wonderful person. And yes, the circumstances changed. What if you could courageously act on who you know you are, right? Rather than tearing somebody down and saying, oh, you've lost yourself, you don't know who you are anymore, right? That's just compounding the manipulation, even though it's done, again, from a benevolent perspective. Even though these people are there to help you, how much did that compound the shame, compound the guilt, compound all that, rather than a different approach of coming and saying, hey, you're an incredible person. I believe in you. I know you're worth more than this. I know that if you choose to stay, you're going to choose to stay there because you see value there. And if you choose to leave, we're here to support you. And we know that you're going to be able to pick yourself up. We know that you're going to be okay.
And I think
and give somebody the personal confidence.
That's actually totally true, because it wasn't until my mother, once I had opened up to her, she came to me from that perspective. She said, you don't know how gorgeous you are. You don't know how amazing you are and how much I believe in you. And, we're going to get through this together. I'm going to take you by the hand, and you're going to take time to heal and grieve. And you are going to just become something that, God meant for you to be. And I think in the Bible, it talks about, God is going to really rebuild you in front of the people who broke you. And that's exactly the confidence she gave me. And so when, I came over and actually left, she continued to breathe that into me. When I was just locked away in my room, knock, knock, she'd knock on the door and, how are we doing today? Get up. Like, what's our goals? I just need you to have some goals, and I need you to know that you can do whatever you want to do, and so it is true when people come from more of like a positive stance, I think that's what gives people the confidence that they can leave and they can stand on their own 2 feet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even in our conversation the other day, Shay, when you're like, oh, I'm putting this off, I'm going to put this off, I'm going to put this off, and I'm going to put you off. And I didn't let you say that to me. I said, well, you can't do it. You can't put me off, but you can absolutely put you off, Shay. You're worth more. You have the ability to do this faster. You don't have to drag this process out. You have the ability to do this faster. And I think we all need people in our corner that do that. I want to highlight one thing. Right now, we've been talking about some pretty heavy things at the end of the day. Like, a divorce is not easy. A divorce on the back of losing your brother and trying to be the emotional support for your brother as he's exiting life. And then 5 days later, after the funeral, you lose your dad. And we didn't even talk about the loss. Was it your dog or your cat?
My dog. Yeah, it was the
dog.
Yeah, I had her for like pretty much my whole marriage, 14 years. And that, so my brother passes, and then the very next day we get a call from our pet sitter, and she had heart failure, and I was trying to do everything under the sun to keep her going as long as I could. I would make her food and make sure she didn't have any water in her chest and everything. But we got the call when I was in the hotel room, and I just, that was hard because she was my first baby, she was my first baby. Sure. And so to lose her the very next day was just like, I remember like my son and me were just like screaming, and, like how hard that was.
Yeah. I mean, it's just an enormous amount of loss in one short period of time. Yeah. The reality though, is most people in the world walking around the society, and this is exactly how you started this out. You can just go to the grocery store and have a positive conversation. Okay. Most people, although they may not, and I'm saying may not because they actually may be going through some very intense emotional hardship, trauma, guilt, shame, fear, anxiety, whatever it is, most people are experiencing something.
Yeah.
And there's a line in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm pretty sure it's in this book. Anyways, they said, you should treat everybody as if they're going through something hard, because 99% of the time you're going to be right. So rather than ever feeling anger, judgment, shame, or like, hey, that stupid person shut me off on the freeway, 99% of the time, if you treat somebody as if they have this massive illness and they're really struggling, you're going to be right. Only 1% of the time would you be wrong if you treated somebody that way.
Yeah.
But think of how many times you treat somebody like they aren't going through anything hard. And 99% of the time, you're wrong. You're just compounding their hardship. And most of the time, whatever they actually are going through is so much worse than whatever you're trying to sling at them. And that's why they don't care what you think, because the level that you're at on what they care about is so low, not because they don't care about you, but because they have so many other stresses. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is it's a shift in our society. We could all, as a group of people, choose to communicate with everybody we come in contact with as Christ would. We could see the God in them. We could speak life into them. We could speak inspiration into them. And if we operated that way, we would feel happier. We would feel more love. We would feel more connection to our God if we chose to behave that way. And everybody can do that. So even though we're talking about these like really deep subjects, I just want to highlight everybody can do that. Everybody can speak life into somebody else. If it's somebody you get in the car with for an Uber ride, if it's somebody you meet at the grocery store, if it's somebody who comes to your house to help you, like whatever the situation is, you can speak life into that person way more than we are currently in our society.
Yeah, and it just takes just like a quick hello, a quick smile, just you never know, what people are going through or thinking. And, sometimes you can just brighten their day with just a quick little smile.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're about out of time here, but I want to finish on what's your happiest memory of your brother, and what's your happiest memory of your dad?
Oh, you're gonna put me out with me bawling. Okay, so my brother was a larger than life personality. Like if you think of like his personality, we'd be like Jack Black, Adam Sandler, Chris Farley, all rolled into one person. He achieved everything that he put his mind to, and he is still an inspiration for me today. And in all that I want to achieve. One of my best moments with him, though, was during his passing. I got to teach him how to pray. I remember I would show up at his house every single morning and I would say, okay, let's pray. We're going to pray. We're going to work out. We're going to sing. Then I'm going to do all your nutrition and everything that we need to do. And he looked at me and said, he's like, Shayna, I believe in God. And he made beautiful music for Jesus and all that. He had a CD and everything. It's online, but he's like, but I don't know how to pray. And I said, well, the starting is just talking to God, but I ended up teaching him how to pray and walking him through the Lord's Prayer. And he had lost the use of his tongue. And so in the end, it was hard to understand him. But the cool thing about our brain is that talking is different than singing. And so he could still sing and you could still understand him. And so sometimes I'd be like, what did you say? And he would sing to me. And it was like the silliest thing. So I remember him singing the Lord's Prayer. And that's just something that's always stuck with me. And it's something that was so beautiful, that I got to bring him closer to God. And it was just like something I'll never forget. Like I got to teach him that, like before he got to meet God. So that was like, that's a memory that sticks with me and probably one of my favorite, just because we became very close during that time. Okay, moving on with my dad. With my dad, I was fortunate enough to care for him a few times in his life. One of the times was that he had his toe amputated and he was having heart failure and kidney failure. And so they wanted to put him in a nursing home. And I said, no, you're going to come stay with me and we're going to fix this. So through nutrition, through amazing things that I learned, I ended up taking his kidney failure from stage 4 back to stage 2. We ended up bringing his heart back too. And so, but it was a really special time for me. we did not have a shower downstairs, and he could not get upstairs. And so I would take him to like this active adult club where they had showers, but we would literally have to walk a mile there and a mile back. And I was pushing him in his wheelchair. And but it was amazing. It was an amazing experience for me, because I compare it to when Jesus got the opportunity to wash his disciples' feet. And he did that out of pure love. And my dad was kind of very like a prideful man. He was a very strong man. And he would say, Shayna, I am such a burden to you. Like, I don't want you to have to wash me in the shower. I don't want you to have to walk all this way. Like, I'm so sorry. And I remember turning him to tell him, I'm like, you're just actually allowing me to be Christ-like. It's an honor and a blessing that I get to give you a shower. It's an honor and blessing that I get to take care of this amputated toe, and make sure you're healthy and make sure, your organs and everything are working. But it was a blessing in my life. It was a time in my life where I became really, really close to my dad. And when I say, it's a blessing to be able to ask for help, or it's a blessing for that person to be able to bless you in that way. That's exactly what I mean, because that's exactly what I lived with him. I got to bless a man who was very prideful and didn't want the help, but it actually totally internally blessed me. And so that was probably one of the best moments with him, was just being able to take care of him, and him turning to me one day and saying, Shayna, you changed my whole life around with caring for me. I am actually coming to a place where I'm loving myself again. And I never thought my dad would, say that. I never thought we would have that closeness. And so, allowing myself to bless him, allowing myself to take him in was a huge blessing, not only to him, but me. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing those, Shay. I know that those are close to your heart. And those are the experiences that I think I live for.
Yeah.
For me, it's how do I have more and more of those experiences that I never want to forget and that I'm always going to remember. And those are just beautiful moments. So thank you for sharing that. What we didn't talk about at all is that Shayna is also a phenomenal photographer, and she has multiple different things that she's doing. And that she's passionate about. We've kind of mentioned a little bit. She's a homeschool mom. She's a single mother. She's working. She's doing different stuff, providing for her family, and really making a big path towards her future and freedom. And it's just absolutely inspiring to see. If somebody wanted to just follow your journey, follow your rise from the ashes as a phoenix, just ready to take on the world, where would they follow you? Where would they get in touch with you if they have questions, if they just want to share their story with you? Because I know you're going to start a podcast. Where would they go to have that conversation with you?
Yeah, right now, the best place is Instagram. I'm starting to share a lot of my stories. I'm kind of like getting out there on that platform. It's just Shayna McKinley at Shayna McKinley. And so that's probably the best way to reach out to me. And if I can bless you. And that's one thing that I did take away from my brother's death, is just to say yes more than I say no, and to have confidence in being able to achieve anything. And one thing I took away from Travis's Strengthen Your World was being all in. And that has been just a blessing, to be all in every aspect of life. So
awesome. I love it. Okay, well, we will catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy show. And thank you again so much, Shayna, for your time and sharing your heart and your soul and your beautiful personality with us. Have a great day.
You too.
When you give someone a gift from the Animal Alliance merch store, you're doing more than just giving them something cute and cozy. You're inviting them to join a compassionate mission. Each hoodie, t-shirt, and mug helps fund spay and neuter programs that save pets. Shop at theanimalalliance.org today. This message was made possible by the Animal Alliance.
Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.